The numbers are impressive. 23,924, 21,620, 17,440. Aren't you impressed? These belong to those who hold the NBA records for the most rebounds in their career. At the top, Wilt Chamberlain. Next, Bill Russell. And third, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Why count rebounds? They don't involve the scoring of points. What would be the purpose of someone sitting and noting every time a man goes for the backboard and jumps and rises ahead of the others and grabs that ball? Well, the fact is, recovery after a missed shot can make the difference in the outcome of a game. I don't have much experience in my professional basketball career, but I will tell you that Christopher and I recently took first and second place, respectively, in a bocce ball tournament. Bocce ball is that game we played at the men's retreat where one ball is out in the field, and then you either roll or throw other balls and try to get them as close to that target as you can. Christopher came in first, I came in second. We were the only two that entered the tournament. It's a time of March Madness. People are looking at scores and teams and what the outcome will be. I saw recently 5 tips on rebounding, and I thought they fit so well with David's response after he had sinned so greatly and fallen so deeply. First, to grab the rebound, have the greatest desire. Want it, aim for it more than anybody else on the court. Second, perfect your technique. And the website explained the positioning of the feet, the legs, the arms, the eyes, and the hands. Third, be the first to react. Get there ahead of your competition. Fourth, pursue out of your area. Don't wait for the ball to come to you. And fifth, finish the play. Failure is not final. At least it doesn't have to be. After David fell, he rose. After he sank, he soared. He missed the goal but grabbed the rebound. It wasn't easy, but with God's help, it was possible. Whatever sin and loss there may be in your life or mine, there's another chapter yet to be written. Aren't you glad? Start writing it today. When a player misses a shot, he can either say, "Oh, I missed. I must be a loser. I'll never try again." Or, "I missed that shot, but I'll grab the rebound and try once more." As you go through chapter 19 and the following passages, you'll see a number of steps in the king's life that were part of his getting back on the court in the game so that the past did not determine his present or his future. Turn there to chapter 19 and remember how heavy the weight was upon him for his son Absalom. All of his men could hear him and watch him and do nothing to help him. And David knew that his own failings as a father had contributed to the issues with Absalom. If only he had reached out to him, reconnected, rebuilt that bridge long ago, but he didn't. And now his son is dead. And David can hardly bear it. And he goes on and on and on. Life is like that. Grief is part of our experience. Many among us suffer so greatly as we think today of the Dunham and Martin families and those that have been bereaved, stricken with cancer and various illnesses and types of pain, a broken friendship, a broken marriage. And your eyes are filled with tears. Your heart is so weary. God understands. That doesn't have to be the last word. But take your time. Shed your tears. Cry out to God and to others. For as long as you will. That's what David did. At the same time, look beginning at verse 5. When Joab, his army commander, said, "You've got to get back to the throne. It appears that you love those who hate you, like Absalom and his men, And you hate those that love you, the ones that are here for your support, that have stuck with you, that have never left you. And I guarantee you that unless you move out of this, there's not going to be a single person on your side. And David rebounded because he could see there was still a place for him, a task, a job, a goal. And so often in our sorrow, when we minister to someone outside of our own circle, then we find God provides healing and helps us to see the bigger picture, the greater perspective, that the problems of others we may be able to assist even when we cannot fix our own. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 1 that God comforts us in our affliction so that we may comfort others who are in any affliction with the comfort that we ourselves have received from God. David had unintentionally alienated all the people around him. But when Joab counseled him, he was willing to listen. And he saw past his own pain, and he took action. And the scripture says the king arose and took his seat in the gate. As a result, David was able to get back on his feet. And David could start to carry out the process that would lead to his recovery and also that for the nation. Look now, starting at verse 8. David was able to pull people together that otherwise would have drifted apart. Those of Judah, his own relatives, he says to them, "You are my bone and my flesh. Let's reconnect. Let's share the tie that we have." And this Amasa, now you'll want to know that he had been Absalom's chief in command. He was on the wrong side, the other side. But he was David's nephew. He was a cousin of Absalom and Joab and Abishai. And for David to say, "Amasa, you're going to run my army in place of Joab," what a bridge he built. So often it's easy to write someone off that's offended us, that took the wrong position, or sided with someone that was an enemy to us. But David shows us if you want to grab the rebound, incorporate that person. Throw out a cookie. Give some hope. Bring that one in. And so he does with the people of Judah and even with Amasa. David shows us that bridges help us all rebound and walls divide and destroy. There was a man in David's past named Shimei. And I want you to turn back to chapter 16, beginning at verse 5, and see how horrible this man had been in his treatment of David. When David was down and out of power, he cursed David continually, verse 5, threw stones at David and all his servants, with mighty men at his right hand and left. He said to the king, "Get out, you man of bloodshed, worthless fellow. The Lord has returned upon you all the bloodshed of the house of Saul, in whose place you've reigned. And the Lord's given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. You're taken in your own evil. You're a man of bloodshed." And in verse 9, Abishai was ready to cut off Shimei's head. And David in that moment said, "What if the Lord has sent him? Perhaps the message is one I need to hear." How humble, how open he was. And so he would not take his life. He sought God's help in his affliction and asked him to return good to David's head. Verse 12. Now the tables have turned. David's not on the run with his son in his place. He's come back. He's taken his seat. The people of Judah, Amasa, all of these are around him. And now, isn't it interesting how Shimei's attitude has reversed itself? And he comes with 1,000 men of Benjamin to apologize, to beg David's forgiveness. What an opportunity for the king to settle the score, to whack off his head, which Abishai, by the way, is once again ready to do. Let me kill him now. And David remarkably builds another connection. And he finds that offering grace and mercy and a new beginning, that's part of the rebound. Because if bitterness and anger and a sense of mistreatment, a desire to strike back, if those things fill our heart when we're out of the game, when we've been knocked down, when we've sinned and we've fallen, and we're looking for somebody else to blame that we can hurt, we will never grab the ball and shoot it and score. And so David, tables turned, now back on the throne, to these 1,000 Benjamites. Shimei says, I have sinned. David says, you shall not die. Question: has David ever spoken or heard those words before? When Nathan the prophet confronted him about Bathsheba, David said, what? I have sinned. Nathan said, God says, you shall not die. Can't we see that David has been where Shimei is? He has failed. He's broken God's law. He's been in a position where David deserved to die. I have sinned. You shall not die. Now Shimei comes. The way that we treat other sinners is a direct reflection of how we perceive how God has treated us. That's why in Matthew chapter 18, Jesus talked about that servant that was forgiven a debt of millions of dollars and should have then responded in kind to one who owed him so little. That God's forgiveness changes our heart and enables us to forgive others. And once more, David, rebounding, putting the pieces together, looking to the future, not mired in the past, has a bridge with 1,000 people of Benjamin. Now, why is that so important? Because David has a natural tie with Judah there in the south. He's from that area. But the people of Israel have been a continual source of annoyance, always trying to put another king on the throne, always trying to unseat David, trying to ridicule him or reject him in some way. That's what Shimei had done. What if David had drawn up the battle lines and determined that there would be a breach from that point forward? Then the rebound never would have come. Remember Mephibosheth, the crippled son of Jonathan, grandson of Saul, whom David befriended because of his covenant with Jonathan. Back in chapter 9, 6 through 10, David provided for him a place at his table, made him a part of his own family, cared for him. He was helpless. He was disabled. He could do nothing to give back. But now something has happened. Back in chapter 16, Mephibosheth's servant Ziba has maligned Mephibosheth and has made it look like he has no interest in helping David in his time of grief and distress when he's been kicked out of the palace. And Ziba has lied. Mephibosheth couldn't do anything about it. Why? Because his feet, he can't go. He can't accomplish any resolution. And David back then in chapter 16 had believed the servant. A favorite proverb is this one, 18:17. The first person to present his case always seems right until a second person comes and cross-examines him. I have made this mistake more than once, and I imagine you have too. Someone comes and brings you a report about a third person that's not even present. And it's all you've heard, and you take that side and you accept it, maybe even repeat it to other people. And then you find out there was more to the story. You jump to a conclusion rashly. And when you hear from the other party, you then apologize and go back and try to undo whatever damage you may have caused. That's exactly what happens here. Look with me at chapter 19 and verse 24. It's obvious that Mephibosheth has grieved for David's loss ever since Absalom first rebelled against him. Because you can see there that he had neither cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed. And now he appears before David. Just looking at him, you can see he's been lamenting that which has happened to the king. David questions him, "Why didn't you go with me?" And then he says, "My servant deceived me and saddled a donkey for himself and brought these gifts to David as if Mephibosheth was not concerned." David accepted the rest of the story and restored that tie with Mephibosheth, and they were reconciled. That's part of the rebound. And then, beginning at verse 31, there's a man named Barzillai. He's from Gilead. In the past, when David was isolated, when he had been forsaken, Barzillai sustained him, provided food and care and comfort. Now, David is back strong again, and Barzillai is 80 years old. And the king wants to take this elderly man with him back to Jerusalem. It's the law of sowing and reaping. What Barzillai had done for David, now David wants to do for Barzillai. The one had sustained the other, and now it was all coming back to him. You know, it reminds you and me that we never can tell a little good deed, an act of kindness, a small gift. We don't do it to be paid back, but how God can use that seed and multiply it. And later down the road, we're so glad that we did it. And so it is with Barzillai. Though as an older man, he says to David, "I'm not able to go. Instead, I'm going to send Kimham with you." Could you all help me advance this, please? Thank you. Kimham may be the son of Barzillai. We're not told. And yet, David offers, and David cares because of what this good man had done for him long ago. David never forgot. In 1 Kings 2:7, when David is about to die, and he's commissioning Solomon, be sure to take care of Barzillai because of the good that he did for me. If you look at chapter 19, you can see there are still areas of friction between the north and the south. These aren't fully resolved. David still has obstacles. He has problems and hurdles in his way. When you determine to rebound from your loss and your sorrow, and perhaps your own failure and sin, don't think that everything ahead will be smooth and easy. Oh, I've got my life back on track with God. I've confessed, I've repented, I'm getting back in the game. God's going to make sure that every shot I take goes in that basket. It wasn't so for David, and likely it will not be for you or for me. Now look at chapter 20. I say to our young people and all of us, if you want to read exciting records and reports of military struggles and intrigue and battles and great events, the Bible is top of your list. This passage tells about a man named Sheba who was going to do David in once more. And he got the people of the north, remember they don't all like David, to go with him. And they start blowing the trumpet. We have no portion in David. Every man to his tent, O Israel. Verse 1. And so he has this huge following. Now in Judah, they support David. But in Israel, they're getting behind this radical Sheba. And everywhere he goes, there's turmoil and excitement. Sounds like some of the recent political events, doesn't it? All the upset and all the pushing and shoving and shouting. And it's going to lead to a horrible division of the country. And David realizes it will be worse than that with Absalom. We have to act decisively. Send the army and take Sheba out. Well, he's made Amasa the commander of his army in place of Joab, but Amasa is delayed. And so David sends, because it's urgent, no time to lose, he sends Abishai, who takes Joab with him. And they pursue Sheba, but Joab kills Amasa, his own relative, perhaps out of jealousy, because Amasa had been given his position. Anyway, Sheba escapes to the north. I'll show you this spot in a moment. In a fortified city, David's men start to lay siege. They build a mound. You know, if the wall was to be crossed, they would just build what they called a ramp, an elevated pile of dirt where they could then climb up, and they start battering the wall. Bam, bam, bam. And they're going to take it down. Except for a wise woman who lives in that city, who has the ear of all the men around her. And she finds out that what Joab really wants is just one person. And if they can resolve this problem with Sheba, the army will leave and all of the people of the city can be spared. She uses her head. The decision is made to chop off Sheba's head and throw it over the wall. She used her head, but he lost his. Can you imagine being in the army with Joab, and you're building this ramp, and you're battering and pushing and attacking, and then, hey, what's that? It's Sheba's head flying through the air. And so because of that, the revolt was put down, and David was able to address this challenge. Now, if you look in the upper part of the map, there you can see this city, Abel Beth Maacah. Abel is Hebrew word for meadow. Beth, like Bethlehem, house of bread. Beth means house of. And Maacah, the person for whom this city was named. And you can see the army going from Jerusalem up north there where they attacked Sheba. Chapter 21, part of the rebound is correcting wrongs from the past, fixing what we can. What's happened is a 3-year famine from heaven because of an issue that went back to Saul and his, quote, bloody house. They had killed some Gibeonites, breaking a vow that had been made 400 years earlier in the time of Joshua. And so David asked the Gibeonites, what should I do? How can we make this right? And because of the house of Saul having created the wrong, then 7 from that house were executed. They were hanged. And David was the mediator. David intervened. He told them, don't harm Mephibosheth. And David corrected what was wrong. And then he collected the bones, particularly of Saul and Jonathan, and gave them a proper burial. He was bringing closure. He was finishing a chapter. He was trying to clean up what went before so it would not affect the future. That's true for you and me as we seek to rebound. If there was an error, if there was an injury, if there was an insult in the past, and you and I can bring other people together, we're doing just what David did, and it's healing for us as well as for them. Wish I could do a separate lesson on this last point, because it's so important. We often measure a man by his productivity. What do you do for a living? And then we men list whatever activities, whatever job we may be involved in. But the time comes when we're no longer able, physically and otherwise, to do what we once did. And in our society, there's a tendency to put such a man down. Well, in his glory days, oh, when he was younger, oh, there was a time when he did this, but he's not really doing much anymore. And then a man can start to think, well, my days are over. I don't know that there's much left for me. What we learn from David is that a time comes to put down the sword and just be a lamp that shines for other people to see. David's no longer the youthful, strapping young boy with the sling and the 5 stones going after the mighty Goliath. David grew weary at this point in his life. We've never seen that before. And there's another giant that might have killed him, Ishbi-Benob. And one of David's men has to intervene to stop David from being assassinated. You talk about a reversal. Before, there was nobody who would stand up to the 9-foot Philistine except for young David. Now, David's not young David. He's old David. He's weak David. He's feeble David. He's weary. There are still giants. But someone else is going to have to take them down. And David's men tell him, don't go into battle anymore, lest the lamp of Israel be extinguished. I want to say today to our older members, your light is shining. I'm thinking particularly of Willis and Diane. What an opportunity we have to honor and thank and praise God for such service. Sometimes the older we are, the farther our light reaches. And we no longer evaluate ourselves or others by the to-do list, by the might and muscle, even by, quote, productivity, however that's defined. But aren't we thankful that among us there are so many brothers and sisters that are just shining a light, and we can see it, we can walk in it, we can learn from it. Now, if you're younger, go into the battle and recognize this is your time. But as you age, don't despair, but recognize your influence is as great as it's ever been, and quite possibly even greater. David's influence would not change. In fact, it would be enhanced during this time in his life. Very practically speaking, you're down, you've failed, you've sinned. You're sitting on the sidelines, you missed the shot, somebody else stole it from you, and you're thinking, I'm dried up. I'm unworthy. I'll never make it back on the court. Put yourself in David's position. Grieve your losses, but look for someone else you can help. Build bridges and not walls. Forgive your foes. Restore your ties. Bless your friends. If there are challenges that you can fix, address them. Correct past wrongs. And age with dignity. The gospel of Christ has to do with the fact that we missed the shot, but Jesus grabbed the rebound. At just the right time, when we were still helpless, Romans 5:6, Christ died for the ungodly. We were sinners, we were enemies, we had fallen, and it was just then and there, when we blew it, that Jesus stepped into our place and took the ball, made the points, so that his whole team can win. If you need Jesus Christ to take your blame, take that ball that you've dropped and do with it what only he can do, confess Him as the Savior. Be clothed with Him in baptism. Galatians 3:26 and 27. Begin a new life. And if you seek a closer walk, won't you come as we stand and sing?